I'd like to provide an overview of restorative justice. My name is Mark Umbreit, and I've been involved in the restorative justice movement since its inception in the mid-1970s. Restorative justice is an entirely different way of understanding and responding to crime. It recognizes that crime is not simply violation of laws and codes. Yes, that's part of it, but at its most fundamental level, crime is a violation of people and families and communities at large. Restorative justice views crime as a wound within the community, and justice requires healing and accountability, not just punishment for punishment's sake. It's not about just letting offenders off for what they've done. They need to be held accountable, whether they're rich or poor, regardless of their background or race. And yet, restorative justice goes far beyond just technical violation of rules and laws. It's about repairing the harm. It's about providing opportunities for those most affected by crime, the victim, the victim's family, offenders, offender families, the community, to get involved directly in the justice process, and wherever possible, to have the opportunity to actually come together in a conversation, in a dialogue, to talk about the real impact of what happened on their lives, their community, their families, and to work out some kind of reparation agreement, oftentimes called a restitution agreement. Restorative justice can blend into the criminal and juvenile justice systems in a variety of ways. Before it actually goes to court at a diversion level, it can occur after it's gone to court, and before sentencing, or even after that. Research has shown it has applied at all of those levels, and historically, restorative justice, particularly in our country, has overwhelmingly been used with young offenders in the juvenile justice system. There are many programs that work with adult offenders as well, but actual practice and the many, many research studies that have been completed have focused on juvenile offenders. Now, restorative justice, at its broadest level, involves an entirely different way of looking at how we respond to those who have broken the law, how we respond to those who have been harmed. And restorative justice, again, at its core, is very victim-centered. It starts with the reality that people have been hurt. They've been affected by crime, their families, their communities. That's the starting point. Then we start looking at, who is responsible for this? And what opportunities can we provide for those responsible for the harm to make amends, to work at bringing people together again and bringing wholeness into the families, into the community. Restorative justice can focus on broad policies that redefine probation, how the court functions in many ways, different treatment programs, how we respond and work with individual victims of crime, individual offenders. But the most widely used, the most empirically based, research-based form of restorative justice is what's called victim-offender mediation. In some communities, particularly in the early years, it was called victim-offender reconciliation. Many communities today, it's called victim-offender conferencing. But the overwhelming term used here and in Europe and other parts of the world is victim-offender mediation. And this provides an opportunity for the person affected by the crime to actually come face to face, meet the person who committed the harm, the offender. The parties are prepared, sometimes by volunteer mediators or facilitators. A few programs have staff do the preparation instead of the mediators. After the preparation, they come together, and the whole focus of bringing them together is to provide an opportunity for an open conversation about the real impact of the crime on their lives, on the victim's lives, and also the impact on the offender's life. And then to work at developing some kind of reparation agreement. The term I frequently use to capture the most widely used, most empirically grounded expressions, models of restorative justice, is restorative justice dialogue. And that's important to emphasize, restorative justice dialogue. Even if some of the programs are called victim-offender mediation, the whole focus, it's dialogue-driven. It's not just settlement-driven. It's providing a safe opportunity for people to come together, to look at each other, to talk directly with each other, to express the impact of the crime on the family who was harmed or the individual, to hear their frustration, their anger at times, but to also oftentimes hear their concern for the young person who committed that act, and for the young person to be able to speak about, why they did this, the impact on their lives, and then importantly, to eventually work on some way of making amends, some kind of reparation agreement. There's different approaches to restorative justice dialogue. Victim-offender mediation, again, is the most widely used. Another model is called family group conferencing or community conferencing. Another model is the circle process, frequently called peacemaking circles, talking circles, and frankly, there's many hybrids where there's adapting the whole process to the specific needs and culture of the community and the families or people involved in the process. Does restorative dialogue through victim-offender mediation actually work? Is there any evidence? The fact is that over the last decades, there's been over 90 different studies in 7 countries that have indicated very positive outcomes of this process of victim-offender mediation and other forms of restorative dialogue. Victims have been found to be far more satisfied with the process of actually meeting the person who harmed them and working out some kind of reparation agreement than if they just went through the court process. Offenders have been found to be more satisfied with the process too, and both victims and offenders have viewed the process as more fair than if they just went through the courts. There's been positive findings for the community as well, more involvement, more engagement of the community, less recidivism, lower recidivism, criminal repeating for those offenders who went through restorative dialogue. And there's a small number of studies that are beginning to find it's clearly less costly and has many other benefits for the system at large. And there's been studies that have indicated that it can lead to real change in offenders, creating a greater sense of empathy and understanding, a greater sense of accountability, owning up to what they've done, and in a way that's not shaming them for what they've done alone. Perhaps making them feel ashamed at times of what they did, but not shaming them. That's different. That's, putting something negative on them that's not particularly helpful for their growth and accountability. So restorative justice as a movement has been out there for 40 years. It's been endorsed by the United Nations, the European Union. It's developing throughout the United States. Surveys that we have done, national surveys, have found that there are restorative justice policies and programs in virtually every state, ranging from very small efforts and initiatives to quite large ones. And it's based upon drawing upon the wisdom of other indigenous cultures that have taught us so much, and frankly that Western civilization has harmed historically, and we're finally coming to grips with. And restorative justice as a movement, we've learned over many years that it can go far beyond just nonviolent property offenses. It can involve very violent and serious crimes. Now that isn't done as common. That's clearly less than 5 or 10% of all of the thousands and thousands of cases that go through restorative justice today. But it's been found it can be used in the whole full range of cases. It's also been found to be very helpful in many systems outside the criminal and juvenile justice process, such as in schools, in workplaces, in faith communities. All of which is to say, restorative justice offers a very vibrant, healthy pathway for moving deeper into the 21st century. A pathway that focuses on healing the wounds created and the harm created by crime, holding those who have harmed others accountable, but in a good way, in a way that helps them grow and leads them into being more reintegrated into the community, and again going right back to the reality of those who were harmed, the victims, honoring their reality, giving them choices, multiple ways of becoming involved in the process so that they're not just sitting on the sidelines. In the most simple way, restorative justice is about providing opportunities to those who are the most directly impacted by crime, victims, offenders, families, community, to give them an opportunity to come off of the sidelines, to be directly involved in the process, and wherever possible, to be engaged in restorative dialogue through victim-offender mediation and other forms.